Hey folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Now, for years, people have asked me the same question. Are the Chicago winged humanoids the same beings that were seen along the Ohio River near Point Pleasant in 1966 and 67? And if they are the same, then what are they? Now, when I started documenting the Chicago sightings in 2017, really in 2011, I did notice something familiar. The red eyes, the folded wings, the silent glide over water and rail corridors, the way witnesses described being watched before they ever saw anything. But Chicago was not the first. Long before Lake Michigan, there was the Ohio River. Long before industrial rooftops, there were wooded riverbanks. And long before social media, families were pulling their cars to the side of the road trying to make sense of something that did not belong in the night sky. So tonight we step back. We look at a Missouri highway in 1999, a Florida tree line in 2017, Tennessee back roads, rural Pennsylvania corridors, and Point Pleasant in November of 1967. Different decades, different geography, but also the same question. Are these isolated local legends? Or are we seeing the same phenomena adapting to the environment and time? And if the patterns match, then we are forced to ask something even harder. Are these earthbound creatures moving through hidden corners of terrain? Or are they something that shares this world with us, but does not operate under the same rules? So let's walk through the cases carefully and do some comparisons. So I'm choosing first a case actually locally in south central Pennsylvania in Dauphin County. The witness, who has lived at the same rural region of south central Pennsylvania and Dauphin County for more than 3 decades, describes an area as geologically unusual zone composed largely of limestone and quartz. Now, according to the witness, beneath the hills is a network of underground waterways, caverns, and tunnels. Now, over the years, the witness has become convinced that this terrain functions as a kind of energetic or spatial vortex that attracts unexplained activity, including unidentified aerial phenomena and what they describe as non-human residents beneath the surface. Now, the witness stated for years that they have regularly observed unusual lights and structured aerial craft in the skies above their property. They also believe that a network of subterranean tunnels runs beneath the Appalachian corridor in this region, with various beings passing through them. Now, while the witness claimed that most of these entities are benevolent, they also insisted that there are boundaries that must be respected, including the understanding that humans should not enter certain nearby wooded areas. Now, several years ago, strange nocturnal sounds began to emerge from the wooded watershed behind their home. At first, the sounds were distant and sporadic. They resembled a long, piercing scream that could not be matched by any known animal native to the region. Now, over time, the sounds became more frequent and gradually moved closer to the residents. The witness described the cause as something between a scream and a wail, sometimes prolonged, sometimes punctuated, and often carrying an unsettling emotional quality. Now, by the following year, the sounds were occurring much closer to the house, sometimes only a short distance from the screened porch. The witness began to sense that the source of the noise was not simply moving through the area, but was instead deliberately positioning itself as to observe the home and its occupants. The witness also felt that the sounds were not random, but directed, almost as though the entity was attempting to communicate. At night, the witness would sit on the raised screened porch and listen as the creature vocalized from behind trees or from lower terrain on the hillside. Now, on several occasions, the witness felt a powerful sensation of being watched, as if by predators studying prey. When the witness spoke aloud to the unseen presence, there was no clear verbal response, but the sounds would often pause, followed by a tense silence that felt deliberate, as if the creature were listening. Now, the witness grew increasingly concerned about their dog, fearing that the animal might be attacked if let outside at night. Now, during periods when the vocalizations were most intense, the dog was kept on a leash whenever taken outdoors. Eventually, the entity came so close that it was estimated to be less than 100 feet from the house. Now, from that elevated porch, the witness could hear it clearly as it vocalized from behind the trees, producing sounds that the witness interpreted as expressions of desire or excitement. The emotional tone of the encounter felt primitive, raw, and unsettling. So on one particular intense night, the witness went onto the porch while the creature was actively calling out. When it sensed the witness, the sounds became louder and more animated. The witness described the vocalizations as highly charged and intrusive, almost as if the entity was fixated on them. Now, in response, the witness deliberately adopted a more aggressive posture. Instead of attempting to reason with the entity, they growled and projected what they described as predatory intent, making it clear that the presence was unwelcomed and would be attacked if it came any closer. The display was sustained and forceful. Now, after that confrontation, the creature never vocalized towards the witness again. For a time, the witness still sensed its presence in the wood, moving silently and watching. But eventually, even that activity faded. The witness believes the entity was either permanently withdrawn or removed by unknown aerial beings that the witness believed monitored the region. Now for a Chicagoland comparison. I look at a case in 2017 from the Calumet Industrial District Cluster. Now, during the 2017 wave in Chicagoland, several lesser-known reports emerged that from the Calumet Industrial Zone along the southern Lake Michigan corridor. The initial sightings were distant. Witnesses reported a dark winged figure gliding along rail lines and river channels, always at night and always silent. Weeks later, similar descriptions placed the entity closer to warehouse roofs and parking lots. Now, one witness described seeing it perched on a structure facing an occupied building. It did not flee when illuminated briefly by exterior lighting. It remained. Now, later sightings placed it flying lower along the same corridor, vehicle level, still silent. And in one instance, after the witness stepped forward under a loading dock light and stared directly at the perched figure, the entity launched vertically and did not return to that structure again. No aggression, no vocalization, escalating proximity, withdrawal after confrontation. Now, a comparative analysis, progressive proximity pattern. In Pennsylvania, in that case, the distant scream, the closer scream, and near the porch vocalization. In the Chicago comparison, distant glide, closer rooftop perch, low-level flight near occupied areas. Both cases demonstrate territorial testing behavior. Now, reaction to the human awareness. Now, in Pennsylvania, the entity vocalizes more intensely when the witness appears. Silence follows aggressive response and permanent withdrawal. In Chicago, the entity maintains a perch when observed, launches when human close, physiologically distant, does not return to the same location, and in both cases, awareness alters behavior. In Pennsylvania, it was highly vocal, emotional tone, reactive. In Chicago, predominantly silent, minimal wing sound, observational posture. Environmental differences may influence behavior, and forested Appalachian terrain favors acoustic dominance. But in industrial Chicago, it favors more of a stealth approach. Now, back in Pennsylvania, the predatory sensation, emotional charge, and directed presence. In Chicago, dread, hyper-awareness, sense of being studied. The emotional footprint is similar. In Pennsylvania, it's a karst terrain, underground waterways, forested ridgelines. In Chicago, you got the Lake Michigan shoreline, river systems, rails, and industrial corridors. Both cases involve edge environments, transitional zones, not open plains, not dense urban cores, but corridors. Now, what stands out is not morphology. We don't see or we don't confirm wing visibility in the Pennsylvania case. We have vocal dominance and progressive encroachment. Now, what stands out is strategy, distance, adjustment, reaction, testing, withdrawal. That's a constant across both environments. This suggests intelligence calibrated to human response thresholds, not random wildlife behavior. Now, if confrontation ended the Pennsylvania activity and human visibility altered the Chicago pattern, what does that tell us about their objective? Are these beings territorial, or are they measuring us? So we look at another encounter in the spring of 2017, very close to the time of the Pennsylvania and Chicago entity involvements. In Brandon, Florida, a resident reported disturbing encounters with a small red-eyed winged humanoid while waiting in her parked car. The sighting occurred at close range and lasted several tense minutes. Now, Southwest Florida has produced similar reports over the years, raising the question of whether this region remains an active corridor of winged entities. What was perched in that tree watching her? So, taking it from the beginning, the witness was sitting in her car waiting to pick up a friend when she noticed a large tree about 20 to 30 feet away. In the upper portion of the tree, where the branches began to separate, there was a noticeable gap in the foliage. After several minutes, she began to feel uneasy, as if something was observing her. When she looked back towards the tree, the previously empty gap now appeared occupied. A dark shape was crouched in the space. Now, at first she dismissed it as her imagination. The tree canopy cast a shadow and no direct light illuminated the figure, but then she saw the eyes. Two large, fully red eyes stared directly at her. They were not reflecting light. They were not glinting from a street lamp. They appeared solid and glowing within the shadow. She quickly looked away, then back again. The eyes remained fixed on her. Now, as her focus sharpened, she realized the figure had wings folded against its side. It was crouched low in the branches. She could make out knees and legs that appeared almost human in structure. There seemed to be arms positioned near the torso as well. Now, the entity looked almost entirely black, though it remained partially concealed in the shadow. She didn't notice any obvious hair on the legs, but the lighting was poor. She estimated that if it had been standing upright, it would have been about 2 to 3 feet tall. Fear escalated quickly. She became concerned for her friend, worrying that the creature might attack when he exited the building. She kept her eyes on the tree and heart racing. Now, when she finally looked back again after a brief pause, the figure was gone. She never saw it depart. There was no sound of wings, no movement through the branches. Now, years later, after gaining access to a computer, she searched for similar sightings and eventually came across an illustration that closely matched what she had witnessed. And the memory still unsettles her. Now, this Tampa Bay region has quietly produced multiple reports of winged humanoid activity over several decades. While not as widely publicized as the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant during '66 and '67, Florida has documented its own pattern of red-eyed aerial entities. Reports from the late 1960s and early 1970s described large bat-like figures seen gliding over coastal areas. More recent accounts in the 1990s and 2000s near Tampa, Clearwater, and St. Petersburg often involved glowing red or amber eyes, silent flight or gliding movement, perching in the trees or on rooftops in compact crouched position. I also received 3 separate winged humanoid sightings in the Pasco County, Zephyr Hills area in 2017, during the same period when the Chicagoland sightings were prevalent. Now, the Brandon encounter aligns closely with these behavioral traits, particularly the arboreal perch and intense eye contact. Several Florida witnesses have also described the sensation of being watched before visually confirming the presence of a winged form. So we're going to compare this to a sighting in northwest Chicago in Portage Park. This was also in May 2017. The witness in the Portage Park area reported observing a dark-winged figure perched in a residential tree at dusk. Now, the initial impression was it was a large owl, but the second look, it just had the wrong proportions. The figure was crouched low in the branch, partially concealed, as the witness described, folded wings, bent legs, human-like knee articulation, head smaller than the body, and bright red glowing eyes. The distance was estimated at roughly 30 to 40 feet. The entity remained still while the witness observed it from the sidewalk. Eye contact was described as intense and deliberate. After a brief distraction when the witness glanced down at a phone, the tree was empty. No sound, no flutter, no falling debris. It was gone. Now, in the Florida case, It was estimated to be 2 to 3 foot if upright, compact crouch, wings folded, human-like lower limbs, and solid red eyes. In the Portage Park sighting, it was slightly larger, estimated to be 4 to 5 feet, crouch position, folded wings, human-like leg structure, and glowing red eyes. Both are arboreal perch entities with compact profiles. No rooftop giants, no gliding silhouettes, and tree observers. Now, both cases emphasize fully red eyes, non-reflective glow, direct fixation. Witnesses in both cases reported that the wings did not appear to be reflecting ambient light. They appear self-luminous. That detail reoccurs in Chicagoland cluster reports. Now, in the Florida report, it appears while witness was present, remains stationary, maintains eye contact, and disappears silently. In the Chicago Portage Park encounter, it was already perched, maintains position during observation, disappears when the witness breaks visual lock. Now, in both cases, no approach, no vocalization, no overt aggression, observation only. Now, in Florida, this was in a suburban area, tree canopy concealed, and nighttime. And in Chicago, the residential neighborhood, mature tree cover, and at dusk, different climate, same arboreal concealment strategy. This is not open sky behavior. This is perch and watch behavior. The Florida entity appeared smaller, and this is significant. Now, Chicago report ranged from 4 to 9 feet tall overall. However, the subset of Chicago cases describes smaller, compact features in trees and near power lines. Now, was this age variation, a younger or compared to an older being, morphologically variation, or entirely separate but related entities? We just don't assume, and we just note the range. Now, this is not a gliding corridor case. This is close-range arboreal surveillance case. Both entities chose elevation. Both maintained stillness. And both relied on concealment until noticed. Both vanished without detectable departure. That pattern suggests environmental awareness and controlled behavior or controlled movement, not random animal behavior. Now, if the Florida entity was only 2 or 3 feet tall, are we looking at juvenile forms or regional variation or separate branches of the same phenomena that appeared in Chicago during 2017? And more importantly, why are these entities so often first detected by the feeling of being watched? But before we continue, if you enjoyed tonight's presentation and want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Phantom Sponsors Radio. It really helps us to reach out to more people who are searching for answers about the unexplained. And make sure to click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our live shows. Now, this next case comes out of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, in November of 1967, it was about a month before the Silver Bridge collapse, near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a family witnessed 2 bizarre figures. First, a goggle-eyed runner keeping pace with their car at 35 miles an hour, then a winged, silver-suited humanoid launching into the sky with glowing red eyes. Now, were these strange beings, or 2 strange beings, connected to the Mothman legend, or part of something even more unusual that unfolded along the Ohio River? So here's the account by the witness. One chilly day in November 1967, my parents decided to attend a private event in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. We were driving southbound along the highway by the Ohio River on the West Virginia side. It was a long ride, and my butt was starting to get numb. To shift around, I glanced out the window and caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye. Now, on the side of the road, in a thin stretch of woods between the highway and the river, there was a figure I initially thought was a hobo or homeless man. He was wearing a brown flannel shirt, grubby baggy brown pants, and a brown hunting hat with ear flaps down. Strangely, he was running alongside our car. I checked the speedometer and we were moving at 35 miles an hour. I kept looking at him as he kept pace with us until he turned and looked directly at me. It appeared he was wearing old-fashioned welding goggles or motorcycle goggles. They had brown frames and bright red lenses. He maintained this speed for several hundred yards until a wide bend in the road separated us, and I lost sight of him. Now, just a couple seconds later, my brother started yelling, "Look, the man, he's flying. That man is flying." This was a different figure. He was dressed in a silver suit with wings, his arms lifted near his chest. I couldn't understand how he was controlling his flight. He shot straight up out of the woods, leveled out, and headed east. His eyes were glowing a bright red, unlike those of the runner. He eventually flew behind a hill, and that was the last we saw of him. So now here's a Chicago comparison. This was in September 2017. A witness walking along the lakefront trail near the South Shore area reported seeing a tall, dark humanoid shape standing near the waterline at dusk. Now, the figure was not immediately airborne. It appeared upright, almost human in posture, partially obscured by low light and shoreline vegetation. The witness described an impression of unusually bright eyes. Now, moments later, the same witness observed a large winged figure rise sharply from the shoreline. It ascended nearly vertically before angling inland toward the city. The transition from ground presence to aerial form was abrupt. There was no visual running start, no obvious mechanical assistance. Like the West Virginia case, the sequence involved ground-level anomaly, immediate aerial manifestation, and rapid departure. Now, in Point Pleasant, the ground runner maintaining car speed. Seconds later, a winged silver human ascended. In Chicago, ground upright figure near the shoreline. Shortly after, the winged figure lifted vertically. In both cases, it shows non-aerial presence immediately preceding aerial ascent. This is not a simple flight observation. It's a staged transition. The Point Pleasant runner had red goggle lenses, winged figure, bright red glowing eyes. In Chicago, the eye brightness noted prior to ascent, red ocular emphasis appears in both ground and winged forms. Now, this raises a question, where these two separate beings are two phases of one phenomena. Now, the Point Pleasant runner maintained 35 mile an hour ground speed, no visible fatigue. The wing figure, though, vertical launch controlled directional flight. In the Chicago sighting, vertical ascent, smooth trajectory inland, vertical lift without wing beat emphasis is common in the Chicago reports. This matches the West Virginia launch profile more than a typical bird flight. Now, in Point Pleasant, it was the Ohio River corridor, wooded strip between the road and the water. In Chicago's Lake Michigan shoreline, transitional water edge. Both involve major water systems. Both occur in liminal zones between land and water. Now, this is consistent across decades. In Point Pleasant, November 1967, weeks before the collapse of the Silver Bridge. In Chicago, the 2017 wave year. Both time periods saw concentrated reports within specific corridors. Now, the West Virginia case presents something Chicago rarely shows, a sustained ground pursuit at vehicle speed. However, Chicago has demonstrated ground presence immediately prior to the flight. The structural similarity is this: manifestation at ground level, rapid shift to aerial dominance, and departure toward inland terrain. Now, the silver suit detail in the West Virginia case is unique. Chicago entities are almost uniformly described as dark or black. That may indicate that witness interpretation under low light are an entirely different morphology presentation. We just don't assume, we just compare structure. Now, if the runner and the winged figure were separate entities, why did they appear within seconds of one another along the same corridor? And if they were the same phenomena presenting in two phases, what does that suggest about the way these beings transition between ground and air? Now, this next case takes place in Northeast Tennessee. And the witness writes, "What did I see? It was a 5-foot-tall bipedal creature with red eyes and a flat face, located in an abandoned town in Northeast Tennessee. The creature was covered in matted brownish-black fur, and its legs were obscured by the ditch it stood in, preventing us from getting a clear view. However, it appeared to use its upper limbs rather than its paws." Now, when we first spotted it, the creature was scrabbling along the embankment as if searching for something. Its movements resembled those of a person looking for a lost piece of jewelry in the grass rather than digging. Despite our bright lights, we couldn't see a mouth or a nose on this creature, and it didn't move as our car slowed to observe it. Strangely, it didn't seem frightened at all. And as cliche as it may sound, its eyes seemed to glow on their own rather than reflecting light. The only local animal whose eyes shine red is a night heron, but we definitely didn't see one. Someone suggested it might have been a Mothman. However, I didn't notice any wings. It was dark, so the wings could have been hidden from view. I should also mention that the creature with a similar description has been reported in the area before, but that was back in the 1920s, according to people I have talked to. So let's give a comparison to the Chicago area. A Cicero, Illinois Railroad ground encounter in August of 2017. Now, initially, no wings were visible. The figure appeared roughly 5 to 6 foot tall when crouched or partially upright. Witnesses described furred or textured body surface, flat or indistinct facial features, bright red glowing eyes, human-like arm articulation. Like the Tennessee case, it was engaged in ground-level movement along the embankment. When illuminated by vehicle lights, it did not immediately flee. After several moments, one witness reported that the figure straightened and extended large appendages consistent with folded wings before launching upwards and disappearing over industrial structures. The initial presentation was that the wings were concealed. Now in Tennessee, it was a 5-foot estimate, matted brown-black fur, flat face, red self-luminous eyes, and no visible wings. In Cicero, 5 to 6 feet crouched, dark, possibly fur-textured body, indistinct facial detail, and red glowing eyes, wings concealed until movement. So the Tennessee case may represent a non-extended wing state. Now in Tennessee, it was a scrabbling deliberately, searching motion, calm under illumination. But in Cicero, the ground-based movement along a ditch, stationary observation under light, and later an aerial vertical ascent. Both involved embankments and drainage terrain. This is not rooftop perching, this is ground-level corridor behavior. In Tennessee, the witness reports lack of fear, neutral observation. In Cicero, it was moderate unease, not overwhelming dread. This differs from high-intensity cases on the Chicago lakefront. Ground forms appear less psychologically aggressive than aerial perched cases. Again, in Tennessee, there were no wings observed. and Cicero, wings were not visible until later extension. Now, an important distinction is that winged humanoids are frequently reported with wings folded tightly along the body, making them indistinguishable from upright mammals at first glance. Now, it is possible that the Tennessee figure had wings folded but never extended them. It's also possible that it was a separate but related species. We just can't assume. Now, in Tennessee, there were similar reports dating back to the 1920s. In Chicago, the 2017 was a concentrated wave. Both suggest recurring presence within specific corridors rather than isolated events. Now, this case complicates the narrative. If the Tennessee entity lacked wings entirely, we may be looking at a ground-adapted branch of the same phenomena, or a transitional state before flight, or an entirely separate ultraterrestrial morphology sharing the red eye trait. The red ocular signature remains strong, constant across the regions. That detail spans the West Virginia cases in 1966 and 67, Chicago in 2017, Florida in 2017, some Pennsylvania corridor cases, Tennessee ground encounter, and the eye trait is the anchor. Now, if wings can remain concealed, how many reported upright cryptids were misidentified because the observers never saw the extension phase? It happened to me in my encounter back in 1988. And if some never extend the wings at all, are we looking at multiple species operating along the same corridor? So let's look at another encounter. This happened in Joplin, Missouri. Edward wanted to share an encounter he and his cousin had in the summer of 1999 between 10 and 11 p.m. local time. They were traveling southbound on I-49 toward Joplin, Missouri, with Edmund driving. He couldn't recall the exact area, but they were not far from Joplin. He noticed a tall figure quickly running from the median to his left and directly in front of the car. Both he and his cousin observed the human-like being and immediately remarked to each other that it looked like a gargoyle. The headlights illuminated the humanoid as well that both witnesses could provide a clear description. This gargoyle was at least 6.5 feet tall and had dark, leathery, hairless skin covering the body. The being looked toward the witnesses, and its face had starkly flattened features with large, deep-set eyes. It had large wings that lay flat against the back, but were extended as it moved toward the right side of the highway. Now, Edward believes the being began to ascend into the air above the field. Now, he also noted that he had no comparisons to make with the humanoid aside from calling it a gargoyle. However, after watching the movie following the 2001 release of Jeepers Creepers, he stated that the humanoid was very similar to the Creeper character. Both witnesses kept the encounter to themselves until a few years later when Edward married his wife. He and his cousin recounted the incident to her. Now, the witness expressed gratitude for the opportunity to share his story without fear of being thought crazy. So now we're going to make a Chicago comparison. This was Route 53 and the I-55 corridor crossing. It was April 2017. A motorist traveling along Route 53 corridor near I-55 interchange reported a tall, dark figure emerging from the roadside embankment and crossing in front of their vehicle. The estimated height was about 6 to 7 feet. It had the body description was dark, hairless, and tightly textured skin. Now, facial structure had flattened features, large eyes. Initially, the figure appeared almost human in posture. Then the witness observed large wings folded against its back as it moved. After reaching the opposite side of the highway, it appeared to extend those wings and rise above the tree line in industrial buildings. No visible flapping, rapid ascent. The driver described the motion as controlled and powerful. Now, for comparison, In Missouri, median emergence, direct highway crossing, wing extension after crossing, and apparent ascent into a field. In Chicago, the roadside embankment emergence, vehicle level crossing, wing extension, vertical ascent over industrial zones. Both are high-speed corridor intercept cases. This is not perch and watch, this is mobility dominance. Now in Missouri, it was 5.5 feet tall, dark leathery, hairless skin, large wings, flat face, dark set eyes. In Chicago, 6 to 7 feet tall, dark body surface, wings folded flat against its back, flattened or indistinct facial features, prominent eye description. The leathery description in Missouri aligns more with the bat-like reports in Chicago than the bird-like variants. In Missouri, the wings flat against the back while running, extended during lateral movement, and likely vertical lift. In Chicago, the wings concealed during the ground crossing, extended for ascent, rapid upward trajectory, the wing concealment followed by sudden deployment in a recurring Chicago trait. Missouri interstate corridor, median to open field transition. Chicago highway interchange, industrial corridor, adjacent open land. Highways appear repeatedly as encounter zone, long straight corridors, artificial clearings through terrain and movement pathways. Now in emotional impact, in Missouri it was shock, later comparison to cinematic creatures, silence for years. In Chicago, shock, immediate disbelief, delayed reporting. The delay in disclosure is common in highway cases. Witnesses are aware of the improbability. Now, the Missouri case predates the Chicago way by 18 years. Yes, structurally it matches the 2017 highway corridor encounters with remarkable precision. The leathery skin descriptions narrow morphology toward bat-like variants rather than feathered forms. Now, these highway crossings are not random. They represent forced interaction points where terrain funnels both human and non-human movement into shared spaces. The median emergence is especially interesting. The Chicago case frequently described appearances from embankments, rail medians, drainage corridors, underpasses. These are not concealment zones. Now, if the Missouri encounter in 1999 mirrors Chicago in 2017 behavior so closely, are we looking at a migratory corridor that predates the Lake Michigan wave? Or have these entities always used interstate and rail systems as modern travel corridors? It's hard to tell. Now, lastly, we talk about the Butler County, Pennsylvania gargoyle. Now, this was initially reported on March 21st, 2011, when Stan Gordon contacted me about a witness who reported a strange encounter with a creature during the early morning hours of that day. Now, the incident took place on a rural road in Butler County between Chicora and East Brady, and it's also an area with a lot of strange activity as well. I had a ferry reporter there from that area as well. Very strange. The witness, a businessman passing through the area, described the experience, stating, "This was the freakiest thing he'd ever seen, and it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck." The man was driving down the road when he spotted something in a grassy area about a quarter of a mile away. Now, initially, he thought it might be a deer, and as he accelerated to get a better look, he saw something hunched down, which then stood up. At this point, he observed a very tall, muscular creature. With his high beams on, he watched as the creature walked in front of a yellow reflective road sign, crossed the two-lane road, not highway, but rural road in three long strides, and continued into a wooded area. Now, the creature appeared to be at least 8 feet tall with smoother, leather-like skin that was either a darker tan or light brown. The creature never looked directly at the witness and was only observed from the side. Its head seemed flat in the front and rounded toward the back. He said at the top of the skull, it looked like one of those aerodynamic helmets. The top wasn't quite a point, but formed a ridge. He noted the face appeared flat, and while the eyes were not clearly defined, the witness thought it might have been pointed at the corners. The ear he observed on the left side was long and flat, extended up and back, resembling a flap. The creature's arms were muscular and slightly longer than a human's. The hands resembled claws, but the number of fingers was unclear. One striking feature was that the creature's extremely muscular legs. The witness remarked that the leg movement did not resemble a human's and said it looked like they bent backwards. He also noted what appeared to be wings on its back tucked into the body, and the wingtips extended toward the side of its head. Now, during the approximately 7 to 8 second observation, the witness did not notice any unusual sounds or smells. And as he approached the location where the creature had entered the woods, it was no longer visible. Now, the following day, the witness returned to the encounter site and searched for evidence. However, the ground conditions were not suitable for tracking and none were found. He measured the road sign and the creature had walked in front of, which stood just over 8 feet tall. The height of the creature's head was estimated to be about 4 inches above the sign. Now we have a comparison in Chicago as well. The LaGrange Park Industrial Quarter, April 2017. A driver in the LaGrange Park Industrial Quarter reported observing a tall humanoid figure illuminated by headlights as it crossed the roadway near a wooded and industrial boundary. Estimated height 7 to 9 feet. Body surface described as smooth and dark with leathery appearance rather than fur. The head appeared flattened in front with a slight ridge toward the rear. Arms were long and muscular. Hands were not clearly defined. Witnesses described the legs as powerful and unusually articulated. One report specifically mentioned that the gait looked wrong, as though the knees bent differently. Large wings were observed folded tightly against the back. The tips were visible near the shoulders or sides of the head. The entity crossed calmly and entered wooded terrain without haste. No vocalization, no odor, and no aggressive movement. Now in Butler County, this creature stood by estimation between 8 and 9 feet tall. In LaGrange, it estimated 7 to 9 foot in range. Both cases exceed normal human proportions by a significant margin. The Pennsylvania case benefits from physical reference measurement, increasing credibility weight. Butler County, smooth leather-like tan to light brown. In Chicago, smooth, dark, bat-like or leathery. Both lack feather description. Both lack visible fur, and this aligns with the bat morphology winged humanoid subset. Butler County, flat frontal face, rear cranial ridge, and backward angled ear flap. Chicago, flattened facial plane, slight ridge toward the rear skull, and the cranial ridge detail is rare but appears in multiple Chicago reports. In Butler County, the witness described legs that appeared to bend backwards. In Chicago, multiple witnesses described gait as wrong, non-human, or jointed differently. Backward bending suggests a digigrade stance rather than a platigrade stance in humans. This is significant morphology consistency. Again, now in Butler County, the wings were tucked tightly. Tips extended toward the side of the head. In Chicago, the wings folded flat along the body. Tips were visible near the upper back and shoulders. Both involved a concealment posture. Neither involved immediate flight during the observation. Now, the behavior in Butler County, calm crossing, no eye contact, no reaction. In Chicago, calm crossing, minimal reaction, silent. Highway industrial corridor crossing behavior matches previous in the Missouri case as well. Now, this Butler County case predates the 2017 Chicago wave by 6 years. The morphological alignment is unusually strong. Height range, leather skin, cranial ridge, backward bending legs, wing concealment. This is not vague similarity. This is structural congruence. As separate species, they share extremely specific anatomy. Now, if the same species, this indicates long-standing corridor activity across Pennsylvania and Illinois prior to media attention. Now, if this 8-foot leather-skinned entity in rural Pennsylvania matches so closely with the LaGrange Park figure years later, are we observing isolated sightings? Or is it a distributed population moving along transportation and river corridors across multiple states? So after reviewing all these cases, one thing became clear. There are similarities. Red eye manifestations, wing concealment followed by rapid extension, highway corridor crossings, water adjacent appearances, calm observational behavior, sudden disappearance. But there are also differences, size variations, vocal versus silent behavior, fur versus leathery skin, ground dominant versus aerial dominant forms. The Point Pleasant entity of 1967 was also often described as towering, red-eyed, winged, and linked to a specific time-bound cluster of events. The Chicago wave of 2017 demonstrated prolonged corridor behavior along Lake Michigan industrial zone. The Florida case presented a compact arboreal observer. The Tennessee case suggested a ground-adapted morphology. The Missouri and Pennsylvania cases reveal leathery, muscular, digitigrade giants crossing highways without fear. Are they the same? Possibly. Are they identical? Not necessarily. Now, there are 3 working models. First, a singular species with regional variation. Second, multiple related species sharing similar morphology. Or third, a phenomenon that manifests differently depending on environmental and perceptual conditions. So now the harder question. Are these Earth plane dwellers? The corridor behavior suggests physical navigation of terrain. But the silent disappearances, the eye luminosity, the physiological effects, the sudden vertical ascents, those characteristics align more closely with what researchers refer to as ultraterrestrial interaction, which I believe it is. Now, beings that operate within our environment but are not limited to by it, we do not have proof, and we do have patterns, and the patterns show continuity across decades in geography. The Chicago sightings are not isolated. Point Pleasant was not isolated. Neither was Missouri, Florida, or Pennsylvania. If these are ultraterrestrials, they have been here longer than our records. If they are earthbound biological entities, then we have vastly underestimated what shares our corridors. Either possibility forces us to reconsider the boundaries of our environment, and that question remains open. So if you've experienced anything like this or had an unexplained encounter or sightings, you can send your report to Phantoms and Monsters. And as always, thanks for listening. Now let's get to the questions. Got any questions, folks? Nothing? Jose Sanchez, do these ultraterrestrials defy our physics with their behavior. It seems so. You know, I've mentioned so many times about there being an obvious supernatural aspect of these creatures, let alone the ability to fly without flapping wings, the red eyes, the possibility of them being able to shapeshift or morph into a different shape, high speed, low speed variants, possibly the ability to be seen by specific humans. Yeah, I think they're ultra-terrestrial, and you know, of course, I could be wrong, but you know, it suggests that anyway. And I don't think they're here a long time. I think they come and go. Magnus 28, Lon, have you heard about the gargoyles in Notre Dame? Sure. I mean, you're talking about the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and the gargoyles. And supposedly there's a lot of stories about these supposed stone gargoyles transforming and changing shape. People have even mentioned over time and that they've actually seen them move. I think that's what you're referring to. But in fact, there's a church in Chicago that has a lot of gargoyles. It's a Catholic church. I forget the name of it. It's in Midtown, but people have also stated that they've seen the gargoyles, stone gargoyles, change shape. And in fact, one of those gargoyles literally broke off and almost hit the person who was observing it. So take that for what it is. Dagnammit. The Mason bird monster moniker was the original name of a flying humanoid before they changed the name to the Mothman. You're talking about Mason County bird. Yeah, that's what that was the original. That was the original title. It didn't last long. When people started describing the same thing as it looking like a moth, and then that's when it changed. Now, who came up with that Mothman moniker originally? I don't know. I mean, but it was started. They started to use it very quickly. Paranormalism Net. How many different races by description of flying humanoids have been reported? You know, I believe there are different races, but just like humans, you know, everybody looks differently. I don't know how many there are, but we've had several sightings of different shapes and sizes, even with slight differences. But I think these beings are all coming from the same place. Anything else? Jose Sanchez, I see it in the chat. Silly theory. Interesting how flying humanoids are often concentrated in Chicago, the Windy City. Yeah, I guess, but you know, it also distinguishes them from a possible human in a squirrel suit, because nobody in their right mind is going to jump off a building in Chicago, because they jump off and start flying down towards the river, and they're going to flatten right up against one of the buildings before it even reaches the ground. So, yeah. Dagnammit, observers are noting that the Mothman as well as Dogman are frequently seen around power plants. I don't know if that's necessarily true. In some cases there have been, but I don't think it's overwhelming. I know locally cases that we've had, even in Chicago, there's nothing to do with many power plants. But I guess it is. I guess there have been some sightings, and I know I have recorded a couple of those, but they haven't been in those areas. Alice Staring. Any new sightings of the O'Hara Phantom? Nope. We haven't had a sighting in the O'Hara area for over 2 years. Not saying it's not going to happen, but we haven't had one for a while. Is that it, folks? Okay, so again, I want to thank you for joining me this evening. The Glimmerman book will be released on Tuesday. It's already up on Amazon, so you can pre-order. It'll be available in Kindle, paperback, and audiobook. I don't know if the audiobook will be right now, but it'll eventually come around. So we're going to be promoting that for a while, and we got a few other things coming up. I got word about we hired a director for the TV series, so we're going to have to get to start writing a few things. But there's another project that needs finished first. So. And look, if there are any book signings by either me, Kyle, or Cam, I'll let you all know about it. They both live in Texas. And of course, I'm here near Gettysburg. So if there are any book sightings or anything like that, we'll put it out there if there are. I think that's about it. So anyway, until the next time we speak or see each other or hear each other, stay aware, stay safe, and as always, keep looking into the unexplained. Have a great weekend. God, I hope we don't get any more snow, but I'm afraid we are. So, good night. Take care.